Hi, and thank you for tuning in to Hot Topics from the Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Valerie Parker Hagan.
And I am with you, our co-host, Dr. J.R. Thicklin, and we are so excited to have you with us here tonight. Very, very, very important topic tonight, and I can hardly wait to get started.
Absolutely. It's February. You know, we're on relationships in February, and we have so many different levels of relationships that we talk about. And tonight, we're going to talk about how to identify and release toxic relationships. You know, you can have all types of relationships, whether it be business or personal relationships, even the relationships with your children, your co-workers. You know, relationships has a broad scale, if I could say. So there's different ways of identifying when something is toxic and when it's not. You know, in business relationships, it can be toxic where you have one individual that's always trying to outpower one another. You know, one of the things I got out of corporate America for was because, you know, all the people pleasing yourself, you
Exactly.
jock in for positions, and once you're always trying to outdo the other, make you look bad, or you know, if you're shining, trying to dim your light. So there's different type of relationships in corporate America that will actually send you over the edge emotionally. So many people are dealing with emotional situations that on their jobs, and it's stressful. That's why you have these workplace shootings and abuse in the workplace. So much is going on in the workplace, even when it comes to relationships. And how do we identify that? And what can we do to cause a shift so that we won't be shifted out?
You know, you said a mouthful there because when you think about it, you gave the example about workplace relationship. You think about it, we spend a fair amount of time at work. That means that we're interacting with these group of people. And so inside of those relationships, we interact with people, we interact with behaviors, we interact with attitude, we interact with people that may be trying to get ahead. We interact with sabotagers. We interact with people that are manipulators. So we deal with all those things, and those things can build up over a period of time that can become very, very stressful. So stressful to the point that it can take you out of character. So stressful to the point that people, as you said, start popping pills. They start going through depression and anger. And we've all heard the term going postal. Well, that's
Yes,
what a person
yes.
has reached the end of their rope and they act out very violently as a result of that internal relationship they have with that place. So even as we see that happen in the workplace, could you imagine what that's like when you're actually engaged in or entertaining a relationship that is really toxic? And when it's toxic, it's no good for you.
No, it absolutely isn't. You know, we deal with gaslighting on the job, constant criticism, and, you know, then to go home to the same type of behavior, it can be very demeaning and make you question your own psychic, and also your own ability to love and even cope in situations, even outside of that workplace. When you get home, how are you able to turn that switch off and on? And can you turn that switch off and on when it's so overpowering in both places?
You know, it's interesting when you say that because when we start talking about even toxic relationship, first of all, part of what we're talking about tonight is really identifying those toxic relationships and then being able to, how do we get out of them? How do we heal from them? How do we release these toxic relationships? And the number one danger when we don't even recognize that it's toxic, you know,
Right.
when we don't really understand that it's a dynamic of patterns where we're being undermined. We're being undermined inside of our well intentions. We're being undermined inside of our efforts. We're being undermined inside of the things that we get out of the relationship versus the things that we put in relationship. And so that undermining, that pattern there, it weighs on us. And it will eventually begin to affect our mindset, our emotion. It start affecting our patterns of what we do. And if we're not careful, we'll find ourselves like a hamster on a hamster wheel. We'll keep going back through the same cycle over and over again, hoping for a different result, hoping for something different.
Absolutely. One of the challenges in relationships is the ability to communicate. How do you communicate how you feel without feeling like what you're saying is so inadequate and they're not acknowledging your pain, because relationships are painful in some aspects when you don't feel the liberty of communicating. I can tell you that me being married for 19 years and my husband was very abusive. My first husband, not my king I have now.
All right,
First
let's make that
husband. Let's
play.
be clarity to that. And I didn't have a voice. The only place I had a voice was when I was working. That's where I felt the most freedom, was at work. So when I came home, it was so overwhelming and overpowering that my light was diminished, that I became very mousy, where I couldn't communicate how I felt in my emotions. And then I was afraid that if I communicated how I felt, that there would be repercussions. So when you have to walk around on eggshells in a relationship so that you won't agitate your partner, that's a toxic relationship.
Absolutely. That is definitely one of those signs there. And we have to think about, it's a toxic relationship, but identify the tactic in which they use. The manipulation you talk about.
Manipulation.
Yeah, manipulation, the control. They're using controls to influence you. It influence, if you would, your action. Manipulation. It's almost like playing with your emotion. Dangling a carrot, so to speak, in order to get a certain reaction out of you. And you'll find yourself feeling like you got to chase that carrot because you want to please them. You got to chase that carrot because, like you said, you don't want to disappoint them. You're trying to chase that carrot because it's almost like a child that wants to do good in your eyes. I just want to be good. I just want to be good. And the problem is, when you're in a toxic relationship, the person will manipulate you even with your good intentions. They know
Right.
that
They
you
have
want
that.
to do something.
A lot of women have that Delilah spirit.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. You might
That's
you
called that's called the Delilah spirit. They stroke you where you need to be stroked emotionally so that they can take control of who you are and your emotions and control you to do things you ordinarily wouldn't do.
Well, I think you used a perfect description because we know the story of Delilah and Samson, and that's exactly what happened. She took the strong man who was ever so strong, and through the manipulation and those things there, was able to bring him to his knees and ultimately to his death. It's a sad thing because the fact she used all those things that was there. She used the ability to stroke and say the right things and to rub the right place and
Mhm.
all those things there, and then would cry out help like the damsel in distress to see whether or not he had told her the truth or not. And even when he hadn't told her the truth, she was disappointed the fact that although he was coming to her rescue, but it really wasn't about the rescue part then. It was really about the fact of what he wanted to do, what she wanted to do. And what she ultimately wanted to do was subdue him because she had a prize on the other end. And those are the things that we have to keep in mind. So when we start seeing the things like manipulation, control, uh, things like even gaslighting, when you bring up things and that person reverse that thing and put it on you, when that person all of a sudden flip the script, so to speak, and all of a sudden now what's happening is that they have you questioning yourself or trying to make you feel like what you're saying is not reality. So now your sanity is in question. They flip the script on you, and now you're trying to figure out, well, how did this become about me? Gaslighting. It was intentional inside of it. And if you live in a relationship that is consistently with that type pattern, it will wear you down. It will wear you down psychologically. It will wear you down emotionally. And when those two things come, you will start seeing physiological differences in your body. I mean, your digestive system can get off.
Depression.
Your nervous system can get off. You start dealing with either anxiety or depression. Those things happen. You're in a toxic relationship. And unfortunately, by that time, you're so sold and in it, hook, line, and sinker, it's hard to get out because you keep trying to make it work. You keep trying to if I could just fix this, I don't want to make them upset. You keep trying, but that person knows that they're controlling you. The
Well, it's
manipulation.
because, I know most women, when they're in a relationship, first of all, the pickings are very few when it comes to men. So they figure when they have a man, they tend to lean to that quote, a piece of man is better than no man.
Yeah.
And
What
they
a
settle and they settle not realizing the consequences of their choices of having that peace when you don't really have that peace mentally yourself. If you're always constantly stressed out and worried about where he is, what he's doing, what he said and what he didn't say, does he love me, you know, does he don't do, is he not loving me? We don't know because of the fact that they're on a emotional roller coaster. That's called control and manipulation. And then we become that dangling on a string, waiting for the puppet master to pull our strings to say that we're worthy of being in their presence. And it diminishes who we are as women because of the fact that we're willing to settle for that piece instead of the whole pie.
Now I got to go there because yeah, that's very powerful, and I like the fact that you gave the fact that women are willing to settle, but we have to understand that it does work both ways. And when we talk
Yes.
about it working both ways, is that we also see this happen with women inside of also doing the same thing to men. So it goes back to a sense of that person's character, that person method of operation, their MO. It goes back to oftentimes people use manipulation as their defense. I'm going to get you before you get me. Or that
Hmm.
individual who's trying to get as much out of you as they simply can. And that's very important. And inside of us understanding the things that are so important, that is so important inside of a relationship. And when we start thinking about these type of tactics, we have to think about when do we start? When do we when do we start? At the beginning of a relationship, what are those things that we filter a relationship through? Somewhere along the line, you just don't walk up to a stranger and say, "Hey, let's go for it." There's something else that we should have that basically I call it the pre-assessment. What's the pre-assessment? The pre-assessment is those things and those questions, those things that you have there, quite frankly, that you're basically saying, I won't tolerate this, I won't tolerate this, I won't tolerate that, I won't tolerate now. It doesn't mean that you start off with a bunch of I don't. But what it does say is that if this individual does not display certain qualities, certain characters, hey, there's no need to give you my phone number. There's no need to have, there's no conversation to be had. When you may notice from afar a person's ethics, the way they, if you would, the way they roll, you automatically kind of check them off the list. Now, that's the pre-assessment. But what is the next level? When a person walks through, because with time and comfort comes trust, but
Hmm.
also with time and comfort comes discovery. And we discover things about people. And so when we start talking about at what point do we let down our guards and we start accepting certain toxic behaviors and manipulation tactics and those things?
Settling. The word for that is settling. And you're
Mhm.
absolutely right, Dr. J, that there are men that go through the same situations that women go through because they like a quality in a woman and they are actually all in. As a matter of fact, I know a lot of men, including you, that when you fall in love, you fall hard, and the skies are the limit. You're willing to do anything and everything to please that woman. And on the other end, then that woman sees how committed you are to the relationship, and then they start taking advantage of the fact that you love them. So it does work in both ways, so I can definitely understand that. And the manipulation part is always really strong. I would really love to go back to those days where when you met someone, remember that high school love, Dr. J? You met that guy, when you was like, oh my God, he's so fine. I want to marry him. I want to be with him for the rest of my life. And you're only in fourth and fifth grade, but you've already seen yourself walking down the aisle, y'all living together, having kids. You don't think about no money, no job, or nothing. All you know is you in love. I would really like for individuals when they meet a person to really go to that level of love where it just simply is. You don't have to do all of this extra stuff because the transparency is what's going to hold you and keep you. I remember when I first met my husband, now Alex, uh, when I met him, I just knew. And he says now that he said when he met me, he just knew. And we just paced it along. If he would have asked me to marry him on that first date, I would have said yes. Because I just knew there was just something about I didn't have to fake anything. It was just that we communicated so easily, our spirits connected. And then, and it's 8 years now, and it's like I tell him every day, I say, I love you better than yesterday. And tomorrow I'm going to love you even more.
But
And we do these little things like this because we continually empower one another to let us know, each other know how much we love and care about them. But that's so missing in so many relationships, Dr. J. It's so, the relationships are power driven.
you know what, you said so much there, and I have to go back because you got to remember the audience don't know how far back we go as best friends and everything. So I remember when your present husband Alex came on the scene, and this is a real good word because we've gone through things, even when it looks good and sounds good, we still look for that trusted wisdom. Lay your eyes on it, do that examination. What do you feel? And I never forget the first time I met him. You probably remember this as well. The first time I met, we go out to dinner. Now, apparently you had told him, hey, you got to go by. Hey, he got to lay eyes on you. And it was so funny to me because he was like, okay, all right, okay, what this all about? And I will never forget sitting there talking with him. And quite frankly, the brother had already got my approval before we even got 10 minutes into conversation. I just saw it on him. I just saw it in him. But it was so interesting inside of that because what it did also show was the fact that although you was in love and totally smitten, you wasn't blind. And,
Right.
it meant a lot to you to say, look, now I'm going to lay some other trusted eyes there on you by people that I know that care about me. And that's one of those things when we start talking about toxic relationships, sometimes we find ourselves in them. Why? Because the fact we don't seek outside counsel because maybe we've been burnt before by people. You just got to know the right trusted people. If you got a person who's loose lips sink ships, no, you don't need to let them know anything. If you have a person who's critical of everything and everybody, you don't want to deal with that neither. But by the same token, if you're serious, because when we start talking about relationship, we open ourselves up to people. We open up, watch this, we open up our spirit. Our spirit. People are walking through gates. They're walking through portals of our lives the closer they get. And so when the interaction and the intermingling starts happening, there's an exchange that's going on. And when that exchange is toxic, it will mess you up emotionally. Once again, emotionally, psychologically, and I dare to say even physiologically. And we'll talk about that a little later, because sometimes when we're in toxic relationship, we don't know where these headaches are coming from. I can tell you
Exactly.
where toxic relationship. We don't know why all of a sudden my stomach is always, oh God, my stomach always nervous. Oh, I don't know what's going on with me. Toxic relationship. There are things that we start experiencing physiologically. And when I say physiologically, because it's both the mind and the body, all those things are intersected at the same time. And so when we start seeing patterns, of behavior, when we start seeing these things happen such as that, we need to examine ourselves. We need to step back. Watch this. We need to step back and take an assessment. Because one of the first things that we have to look at is lack of respect.
Yes.
Lack of respect is one of those early signs of a toxic relationship. Lack of respect. Does this person disregard your boundaries? Do they disregard the things that you value? Do they disregard your feelings? Do they now consider themselves the sheriff of your autonomy? You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other things like that. Don't
They start
misconstrue.
functioning in selfish behavior because it makes
Exactly.
it all about them and nothing about you.
Exactly. And so in other words, in order to really be healthy, you got to know where you have set your core values. You got to know where you've set your own boundary, because this individual, if they disregard all that, that means that they don't have you in mind. They only have themselves in mind. And keep in mind this, these things can go on and on and on and on. And you find yourself, although you're the one being manipulated, you're the one that's going through the hurt, you're the one dealing with the toxicity, you find yourself still trying to jump hoops because you're still trying to please this person. It's always like, man, what can I do? Yeah, you want to make it work. You really want to make it work. And I'm saying, when you can identify these things at the beginning, you really need to take a real look and be very aware of the investment that you continue to make. The
And the
investment.
fact that a lot of times, if you bring up and share with that partner how you feel, and they constantly say, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean to do this," and then they turn around and repeat the cycle over and over. It's just lip service. That's not really what they say that for you to stop saying how you feel, and to put in closer, because they don't want to hear it, because in their mind they're like, yeah, 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 let me just tell them what they want to hear, and then soon I'm going to get them and we'll be all locked in. And that's why you have a lot of divorces, because they're acting as chameleons. They're trying to be everything you want them to be at that particular time, and they figure once you walk down the aisle and you get on the bank accounts and whatever, then you see this whole different person show up, because your money is their money is their money.
So are you saying the old proverbial, what's yours is mine and what mine is mine?
Yeah. See, so you got to look out for that manipulation too. You got to make sure that that person is invested in you as much as you are invested in them, not only financially, but emotionally. How are you, and will you stand by my side if I'm no longer able to perform in the capacity that you're accustomed to? You know,
Well, that's
because
an
life
interesting
will
point.
happen. Life shows up at different stages and different ages. Life will show up.
You know, some of the things that we're saying right about now, we speak of the fact, to a certain degree, a person who may be considering entering a new relationship. I like to be transparent in this fact here. I don't pretend that people don't have a need to be in a relationship. You ain't nothing super spiritual about you because you try to act like I don't need a relationship. I don't want a relationship. You was made for a relationship. Period. You were made for it. The fact that you've been unsuccessful in having a sustainable, healthy relationship, or one that sustained, speaks of your experience. It doesn't speak of your need. And so what we have to be very careful of is that how do we do not repeat patterns? What are
Right.
things that I actually gave people permission to do to me? You say, hold up, I didn't tell them to do that to me. No, but your silence co-sign on side of things that are happening. That means that if you can identify early signs, those early signs should be indicative to you that this isn't going well. If you're with someone who constantly criticizes you, uh, belittles you or demeans you, they make you feel inadequate. You get nervous around them. You start fidgeting around them. You don't know what to do because now you're on eggshells because you flinch around them because you don't know how they're going to be. That is not healthy.
Right.
That is
Especially
toxicity.
if there's weight problems going on. You're going out eating and enjoying one another. And sometimes one partner picks up weight a lot quicker than the other. And they be like, oh, you're getting a little fat here, you're getting a little pudge here. And then you constantly be self-conscious around that person that you're in love with, because of the fact that they said, oh, you're looking a little chunky there. And then you're feeling chunky, your clothes, then all of a sudden your clothes don't fit you right. You can't get your hair right, can't get your makeup right because that person made a remark. So it dims your light and lowers your self esteem to make you feel inadequate. And while they're constantly, they start with one thing and then they start with something else and then something else and then something else. And then here you are, mousing down and feeling so inadequate to fulfill that need that that person has, and think you're walking in love, and it turns into depression.
You just used a term that I hadn't heard before, mousing down. I had never heard that term before. And that's exactly what happened. You find yourself mousing down. You're there because it's, once again, it's almost like you don't want to displease them, but you're more preoccupied with displeasing them than they are about pleasing you. You're more preoccupied about not displeasing them than they are about pleasing you. And so when we start feeling those things, it's not the time to ignore them. It's not the time to act like it's not happening. You have to assess the emotional impact that this relationship is having on you. In other words, let me say this: trust your instincts.
Right.
Trust your instincts. Acknowledge your feelings of discomfort. Have that conversation.
And not only trust your instincts, Dr. J, but be willing to accept that instinct that is being brought before you, which you know is a warning sign. Don't negate the warning sign because you want to be in this situation, this love pact that you have going on, or because you're worried about what your family and friends may say.
Yeah.
A lot of times we stay in situations because we're more concerned about what it looks like on the exterior, and we're drowning internally.
Dr. Val, it is so important how that dynamic plays a big part, right? Because it's a form of pride. We don't want to be judged. Let me be transparent. If you've had failed relationships or failed marriages, two things will happen. The enemy will either come to try to make you feel like you're not worthy, or try to shut you down and say it'll never work. And the criticism will be, they need to sit down somewhere, as if you don't ever want love or you don't ever want to be in a relationship. What they really need to do is really to get themselves together, evaluate themselves, redefine where are my boundaries, what is it that I value and love about myself. In other words, I won't be defined by you. Because
right. You don't have to be validated. We're looking for that validation. I am not going to allow you to validate whether or not I'm worthy or not. And that's where it steps in. Do you know, Dr. J, between my marriages, it was like 19 years. And I had so many people say, I can't believe you're not married. You're so beautiful. You're phenomenal. You're a businesswoman. Why aren't you married? Mm-hmm. Society puts that pressure on you. But it's better to be alone than to wish you were.
Isn't that the truth, right? And there are a lot of married people that can testify it's better to be
alone than to wish you
were. Or better to be single than to wish you were, right? Inside of that. And we have to go back to, once again, I say this from personal experience. I believe in love. I believe that relationships can be healthy. I believe that that life was meant to work. I do believe that. I think we have to assess what we've gone through, so that what we have gone through, that we will grow through what we've gone through. We will learn the lesson of relationship from what we've gone through. Why is this important? When I say that, it's not just a matter of examining that person that you fell out with, that person that you broke up with, that person that you divorced or divorced you. It's not enough just to look at them and what they did wrong or what was crazy there. You have to also turn that light on yourself and start going through the process of, what was my thinking? What was my values? What was my core? We have to start thinking about those things and really walking through it and be able to accept and admit certain things I did that I should have not have done, things I could correct, things that should have been better. Because if you don't do this is what will happen. You'll end up being bitter. You'll be bitter and angry because you've never dealt with that. And so what happens, even if somebody was trying to come into your life that could be good to you, you're not accessible to them emotionally because the bitterness you're still carrying from what you went through before. And it's really a matter of saying, don't allow someone to make you bitter. Commit to yourself that you're going to become better. And when I say commit to yourself that you're going to become better, it doesn't mean that you're saying, hey, I was so terrible in the last relationship. No, it just simply means that I'm committed to being wiser. I'm committed to being more intentional about how I do things, the way I do things that I'm willing to accept and things that I'm not willing to accept. It's one thing to see a person who may need just some instruction. They need some help along the way, but you see the core in them. You see the core in them. They really are loving. They really are compassionate. They really are caring. They really are endearing. They really do want some things. Now, I've seen people just like going to a car lot. Sometimes you go to a car lot and, man, you see a car look very, very nice and everything. And you know, they crank it up and stuff. And you test drive and you go, wow, very nice, but it look like you're kind of skipping or it look like something there. Well, a tune-up may do wonders. That might not be the car you want to totally discard. It might need some tune-up, meaning some tune-up inside of TLC, some tune-up inside of just Experience. But by the same token, you wouldn't go on a lot and you see a car that got every type of sign. It's bent up, it's dented up, you know, it's got smoke blowing back on it from the beginning, and then you get in there expecting it to be smooth. No, your eyes just got to be open enough to recognize, here's some signs I see that are toxic.
Absolutely.
How does this person communicate? Evaluate our communication dynamics. Is this person a quick arguer? Do they lose their temper quickly? Are they short-tempered? Are they very critical? Are they, watch this, condescending? Do they, if you would, look down on you in order to elevate themselves? Do that person feel that you should bow to them simply because of their financial status? Simply because of their position status? Simply because of the fact of their popularity status? All of those things we have to be very concerned about, because of the fact, oftentimes what looks like gold isn't gold at all.
Absolutely. That goes back to what you were talking about, setting boundaries. When you're in a relationship, you need to set boundaries also outside with your friends. It's okay to, talk, share with your closest friend something if you have concerns in your relationship, but by all means, never ever give out intimate details about your partner. They will wind up taking your man or taking your woman. So don't ever expose yourself in that situation where you're sharing intimate details of your relationship. But if there's a situation where your partner has a temper, or you may think he's cheating, or the fact that he's always diminishing your value, and you want to share that with someone that's close to you and try and get advice. But the ultimate advice is to seek counseling, get professional help. If you're in that situation or that space. I didn't know about counseling when I was going through my first marriage or anything. So I confided in a pastor and ministers that what was going on. But they weren't equipped to handle anything regarding domestic violence at that time. It was like it wasn't supposed to happen. So they didn't know how to identify it. All they do was, I'm going to pray for you. Well, I need you to give me some steps on how to get out, some exit strategies. If I'm in a situation that's toxic, and say you're living together and it's time for you, and your money is being put into a pot with his, you got to find a way to put some money somewhere else so that you can prepare for your exit strategy. Start looking for a place where you can live so you can remove yourself from that situation. And by all means, let family members know what's going on, so that if anything happens, they're a phone call away. They know to move and maneuver to get you out of that situation.
You know what? You said a mouthful in so many things. And one of the things that to keep in mind,
I know I'm
One,
trying to pile it all in because we're almost out of time. So I'm trying to
yeah,
give as much information as possible to justify on both sides, actually. Because,
exactly.
what I just said is so profound, but a lot more men will take that exit strategy. They will take all the money and all everything and just leave and leave that woman there. And she's sitting waiting for them to come home, and they done moved out, done got another apartment, engaged to somebody else. I know so many of women that were in a relationship and they thought they was engaged, and that man left and married somebody else.
Well, and that goes back to three things. They go back to, once again, recognizing patterns, being very intentional in what you're seeing. Do I see certain behaviors over a period of time being persistent? Uh, that part that you said earlier, a lot of times we are afraid, we're embarrassed to admit that we see what we see.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes
We're
we think,
blind.
yeah, we think we're too far in. So now embarrassment takes precedence over our sense, our logic, or even over our reasoning. And so I'm more embarrassed. So I'm more concerned about being embarrassed than I am about the emotional impact and sometimes the physical impact that this relationship is having. And so be very careful that you don't remain in a relationship for the sake of optics. For the sake of optics, the way it looked. You guys look like a power couple. You
Yeah.
guys, and it sounds good, and it may even feel good, but it only feels good for a moment because behind closed doors, you know how you're being treated. You know how you might be being belittled. Here's another one. Now let's throw this out here, and this works both ways, but particularly a woman has to also be very careful when the brother is always manipulating them financially. They ain't never gotten that. Baby ain't got it. You got it this time. You got it this time. You got it the next time. You all, and so what's happening here inside of this? Before you know it, you've almost become a sugar mama.
Yeah, and the thing is, nothing wrong with if you're in a relationship, there's nothing wrong with a female taking up the bill. But all the time, that's a
Exactly.
warning sign right there. Every time you got to cover the bill, you between blessings every time.
Exactly right. And so be very careful about that. Also be very careful about the fact that the person always talk about, baby, can you let me hold a few dollars? Let me borrow this right now.
No, no,
If
no, no,
that
no, no,
person
no,
is,
no,
I'm
no.
not saying people don't hit hard time, but if that pattern is always happening, be very careful of what you're seeing. Now I'm going to say something, and don't y'all judge me, because this has more to do with just being straight up talking. Don't become blind and take on things just because of the fact the love making is good, and the love making is good. That doesn't forgive the manipulation. That doesn't forgive the abuse. That doesn't forgive all those things that are happening to you. And so it goes back to your core value. What is it that you believe that you're worth? What do you believe that what is your value?
Right, right.
You respect. You know what the real meaning of respect? This is Thicklin definition since 1995. You won't find it in Webster. You won't find it in Oxford. You won't find it in those dictionaries. But this is Thicklin's definition of respect. Respect is valuing one's self worth. Respect. I value my sense of self worth. Respect doesn't start from the outside in, it starts from the inside out.
Inside
Because
out.
because I value my sense of self-worth. I value who I am. So because I value who I am, that's the reason I don't act a fool. I don't because I value who I am. That's the reason I don't do certain things, because I value who I am. So if I value who I am, I expect you to value who I am. And if you can't
Absolutely.
value who I am, then it's time for you to take a page out of the whiz. Ease on down the road.
Hmm. And there's a lot of expectations people put. They have their dream boards and the expectations based on other people's relationships that they fold into, and they want it to happen for them. And I always was my own individual person. I didn't care what anybody said or what anybody did. I was going to do what satisfied me because I knew what I came out of. I knew what I left. And it took me all that time to be open to the possibilities of loving and giving again. So I was always not looking. I was about my business, doing what God had me to do. And when it was time and I was well with myself, mentally, emotionally, and feeling good, then I was open to the possibilities of having someone else in my life space. And a lot of times we don't prepare ourselves to be able to be in a relationship. We have our boards, our vision boards of what we want, but what are we going to give to that relationship? What is our impartation to make it work? And a lot of people don't consider that, Dr. J, that it's work. You have to be invested in yourself. You have to be invested in that relationship. Love is an emotional investment and contract between two hearts. That's my best definition of what love is.
And it's a very powerful one. You hit so many things in that statement when you talk about being open to it. So let's talk about what happens, because we're talking about how to identify and release toxic relationship. So in order to do that, we not only identify what they look like and what they are, but how do I release it? But then how do I recover? How do I recover? So one of the things that we failed to mention, but we'll get to now, is when we start talking about those signs of toxic relationship. And I talked about it, is that we have to evaluate the communication dynamics. Why is this
Mhm.
important? Because the communication dynamic is the thing that opened up the door to everything. Does this person use manipulation? Is communication one-sided? Hear me, because it's very important. Is it one-sided? Because if it's one-sided, consider this. That person may dismiss your concerns or your feelings. They
Mm.
may shut you down when you try to voice your opinion. That person may intentionally stonewall, meaning they won't talk about things when it's important issues. When you really have a concern, you say, baby, we really need to talk about this. We really talk about this. I ain't trying to hear that right now. So what's the big deal? What you complaining about now? They shut you down, right? Not only do
Shut
they
you
shut you
down,
down,
right?
yeah, but
They're
but
afraid
but
of truth.
yeah. And so be also aware of passive aggressive behavior, when basically what they're doing inside of passive aggressive behavior, folks, is that they really are avoiding you, right? They have subtle hostility toward what you say. So you're trying to have a conversation, and you could be talking about something totally different, but they are demonstrating hostile attitude, the energy. Don't let no one fool you. That's an aura that goes around people. You have an aura.
It
One of the
is.
things, one of the things that let's just put it full disclosure. Beauty can't be everything.
Right.
Money can't be everything. All these things can't be everything. Sometimes you got to evaluate the spirit of someone. What is the
Hmm.
aura around them? What aura do they give off? Do they make things better around them? Do they make you want to be closer to them? Do you feel a sense of enlightenment? Do you feel a sense that, man, I increase when I'm around that person? Not increase in grief, not increase in pain, but I increase in sense of comfort and peace. I increase in the fact, God, I feel like I've grown. There's something that happens when I'm around them. Now, you can easily identify those things, but by the same token, you have to step back and reflect and say, hold up, why is it that when they come around, I feel deflated? Why is it when they come around, I feel as if I'm clumsy? I
Not
can't.
enough.
Why is it when they come around, I feel as if, you know, that I can't do anything right? Does this person always try to control? Now we talk about power dynamics, right? That's what we saw, control and power dynamics. Is this person always got to control everything and power? These are things, folks, that we have to be serious about. And if you want to put on a spiritual level, you got to discern. Because we go back to 1 Corinthians 13, love, and we're really talking about love at this point in time. We know what love doesn't behave itself unseemly. It's patient, it's kind, and all these things that we're talking about. It seeks not its own and all those things. But you're dealing with a person who's constantly selfish, always selfish, always selfish, always selfish. It's always about me, myself, and I. Everything they got an iPhone, an iPad, or this, or that. They don't have no sense of we, no sense of we.
Yeah,
And
definitely got
so
to look out for that.
you have to look out for that, because Dr. Val, if you don't, And that's real good, Dr. Jawanda. It's called discernment. It's discernment.
Mm-hmm.
We have to discern. I don't care how good or fine you are. Okay. If your spirit is jacked up when it's tore up on the floor. Now, when I say jacked up, I'm not saying the fact that you're perfect, because there's no one that is perfect.
No one is perfect.
But what I'm saying is that the very aura of who you are is destructive. The very aura of who you are is negative. The very aura of who you are is not one that lends itself to improvement, but lends itself to always being in control, being on top, oftentimes disregarding things that are important to me. It's all about you. Mm-hmm. These are signs of toxic relationships that are there. You got to observe patterns over time. Observe those patterns. Don't deny them. Observe them. Now, I know what we're gonna say. We real good and save people. Well, I'm gonna observe, and I'm just gonna pray. I'm just gonna pray about it. I'm just gonna pray. Yeah. And I'm not telling you not to pray.
Yes, you were not saying that.
No,
but the Bible also says, "Watch and pray." So if you're watching and something is not conducive to the lifestyle that you know that God wants you to have, then you know you need to detach yourself from that. You don't have to pray about it. It's just plain out wisdom and common sense.
And we have to, once again, we just have to recognize when we've been manipulated. I don't care how much that person may come back and baby, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, baby. Please forgive me, baby. I'm so sorry. I promise you I'm going to do better, baby. You know, you deserve better than that. Come on. I'm a better man than that. I'm going to show you. And guess what? That sounds good at the moment. But is that a rerun movie that you hear all the time? Is that a rerun that you constantly hear? Does this person never take responsibility for their actions? Does this person always have an apology after they've committed the act? You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. There's nothing worse than a person that wants to tell you they're sorry if they don't sorry after they committed the act.
Yes, just like an abuser. They'll punch you in your face and be, "Oh, baby, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that." And then the next day they can have one eye, and then they'll get the next eye the next day. And how many sorries you're going to go through?
Exactly. And we have to be very careful about that, because what happens is this. It even happens with conversation. I go back to that communication is big, because watch this person. Watch how quickly they escalate. A disagreement will escalate into an argument. It escalate to the fact of physical threat, and then sometimes physical abuse. That evil look like they could just knock you out. Manipulation tactics. Listen, what are you waiting on? You're not waiting to be knocked out to say, I think this is a bad person. No, you see the energy. Remember, James says this. He says, listen, he talks about the fact that the wrath of men does not work out the righteousness of God. When you're dealing with a person who's very quick to wrath, they escalate, they go from 0 to 100 like that. First of all, it's dangerous. Mm-hmm. It's a very toxic thing. It's very dangerous. And stop making excuses. When I mean say stop making excuses for them, well, you know, they grew up with that, their daddy. What that got to do with the fact of them treating you the way that they're treating you? No. Now you have to make up your mind early on. Are you planning on being a babysitter? Are you going to try to re-raise him? And what are you going to do there?
No, Dr. J. The famous thing is I'm going to fix him. I'm going to fix her. I'm going to fix him. That's the pen that's written on their document of a relationship. I'm going to convert them into my way, into my thoughts. Whatever I'm doing, I'm going to incorporate them into that. We're not going to have no balance. It ain't going to be no us. It's going to be me, myself, and I.
You know what?
And a lot of people really aren't in that stage where they want to be in a relationship. Two people, relationship. They don't even know what relationship is.
Right. Because you got to be very careful who you make yourself vulnerable to. Mm-hmm. You know, any real relationship does require a degree of vulnerability, a degree of transparency. And so when you start talking about toxic relationship, watch what's important. Inside of toxic relationships, you got to understand, even if that person, you've called that person on the carpet, when that person then offers you a reverse ultimatum, man, run. That's toxic. What does a reverse ultimatum sound like? Sounds like, well, baby, I'll go get help. I'll go get counseling if you don't leave me. Baby, please, I'll go get counseling if you don't leave me. Baby, I promise, I'll go to church if you don't leave me. No. You need to go to church whether I leave you or not. You need to recognize that you got some issues that you need help in. And if that person's not willing to go and get help and seek help in and for themselves, then what I'm saying to you is this: it is still manipulation. Because now I'm going to do this in order to,
I'll do better.
I'm going to do this in order to keep you at bay. I'm going to do this in order to keep you from leaving me. That must not be the ultimate reason. I need to do this because I recognize I got some issues. I need to do this because I recognize I got some control problem. I need to do this because of the fact I'm messed up. Watch this. Examine your own self, brothers. I need to do this, man, because I've done the same stuff in every relationship. I need to do this because of the fact, man, I just haven't grown up. I need to do this. Now, yes, you can look at your life and say, well, that's the way I saw my daddy do. That's the way I saw the men around me. But when are you going to grow up? When are you going to grow up? If you saw your dad, your uncle, whoever do it, and you knew it was wrong then, what makes it right now? It doesn't. Those are toxic things. And so a person, we're not saying it's always easy, but it's necessary to exit a toxic relationship. It is necessary. Many toxic relationships, unfortunately, ends in death, ends in severe injury, ends in loss, ends in pain. And sometimes it's so damaging that you start feeling like you're no good for anyone else. You start feeling like, you throw in the towel like there's no good man, there's no good anything. And I'm gonna leave you with this one. As you heal, notice what I said, as you heal, you got to be ready for the new you. Who is the new you? The new you. The new you may be actually being willing to open up to something that has been outside of what you thought before. What do you mean? Well, you may have had this whole thing about I only date men that look like this, have this, and all those things there. How does that work out for you?
How's that working out for you?
Yeah, how's that working out for you? Because now, watch this. You're holding on to a preference, but you're missing out on your purpose. You're holding on to a preference that did not do anything to help exercise or execute your purpose. Perhaps what you really needed was somebody who was more mature. Someone who had a greater view inside of what relationships is that value love. Now, I will say this to you here, and I always say this. If you could find a brother who really loves his mama, and I'm not talking about to the point that they mama boys. I'm not talking about that. Because the mama boys will neglect you for mama, okay? No, we ain't talking about that. But a person who really value their mama, value their sisters, and really have a value for that and understand the fact that my actions, I look at what I do through the lens of my sisters, my daughter, my mom. Would I want that to happen to them? Would I want them to be treated that way? When you deal with a person that is that level of maturity, that they understand, man, I'm still learning. But in
a lot of cases, Dr. J, they're individuals who weren't raised by their mother or don't have any sisters. So therefore, they don't really know how to treat a woman and how to love a woman. They go by what their buddies say. So there becomes a breakage in that. So, that's not necessarily always the right thing to say is watch how they treat their mama or how they treat their sisters, because a lot of them don't have that to glean off of. But I will say, watch their heart.
Absolutely.
You can't fake their heart.
Well, absolutely. Because even when you say that, you and I, we've had this talk. I always say this. One of the greatest things that ever happened to me, I had nothing to do with. That I was born into a family, a large family. I had 6 sisters and 3 brothers. 5 of my 6 sisters was older than I am. Mm-hmm. My greater influences came from my sisters, not from the one brother that was older than I am. The great thing about being around those sisters is open conversation. They just taught me to be myself. I didn't have anyone to teach me the game. Both times, let me show you that. No, it wasn't that. So when you learn to be authentic, when you learn to be secure within yourself, when you learn that you don't look for manipulation in order to get to know people, you look for communication. How do I get to know you? And by the same token, inside of the way you treat someone, it's got to be consistent. It's got to be a consistency inside of that. Do you honor people? You know, where do you get your cues from? You know, what is your narrative? What affects your perception of how you see a woman or how you see a man? Because you can start back from there. You can start back from there. We can live love on the defensive or the offensive.
Mm-hmm.
But only when those two things come together and we see through a lens of growth, a lens there, we'll miss out every time. Main thing, don't stay in a toxic relationship.
Absolutely.
Admit to yourself that it's toxic. See the signs there that are there, and it will make a great difference. And we don't have a way of posting this. I wanted to just, I wish I could just share. We could just put inside of the text some of the most crucial signs to look for, because those things are very beneficial to us.
Well, I think that we've put a lot of information into the show that'll make people aware. And I'm so excited that next week we'll have Jason and Rhonda Turner on the show. So they're a power couple that specializes in relationships. So we look forward to seeing them on next week's Hot Topics from the Soul. And I appreciate all of you tuning in. And if this show has blessed you and the information was good, I appreciate it if you would share it, and by all means subscribe to Hot Topics from the Soul on YouTube and pass the show along, because there's so many people that are in between. They're in between relationships on a job. They're in between relationships as in their personal lives. And there's so much going on with individuals today, and they're dealing with mental illness in the midst of all of this relationship stuff. But one thing I'm sure of, that love affects our past, our present, our future. Love is an emotion and a gift given to us from God. And one thing I know is it should never, ever hurt. Good night and God bless.
Good night.